What if the most decisive battles are decided before the first shot is fired? What if, before a single shell is launched, the outcome is shaped by invisible hands, by plans so meticulous and deception so profound that neither side fully understands the stakes until it is far too late? Wars are not always won by those who hold the bigger guns or the most advanced tanks. Sometimes, it is the mind that triumphs, the mind that can see through the fog of war, or better yet, create it for others. Let us travel to early November, 2025. The eyes of the world, from war rooms in Brussels to newsrooms in New York, are fixed on a jagged protrusion in southern Ukraine, the Robotine salient. This sliver of land, barely more than a few dozen kilometers wide and 30 kilometers deep, is the focal point of a confrontation between Ukrainian and Russian forces. It is a place where advanced Western technology meets old-school Russian cunning, where the present collides with echoes of the past. To Western observers, the Robotine salient is a wedge of hope. Ukrainian troops, armed with the latest equipment from the United States, Germany, and the United Kingdom, Leopard tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, precision-guided HIMARS rockets, and swarms of reconnaissance drones, have driven a spearhead deep into Russian-held territory. On their maps, this bulge promises a breakthrough. Like a dagger pointed toward the Sea of Azov, it seems to open a corridor for liberating the south, for severing Russian supply lines and perhaps shifting the war's momentum decisively in Ukraine's favor. But for Russia's high command, the salient is something entirely different. To them, it is a lure, a finger thrust recklessly far into enemy territory. The image conjures memories of past conflicts, such as the German salient at Kursk in World War II, where an apparent opportunity for attack became a carefully baited trap. Russian planners see the Robotine protrusion as a chance to repeat history, to envelop, cut off, and destroy the best of Ukraine's army in one devastating blow. Both sides pour their best into this crucible. Ukraine concentrates at least 6 mechanized brigades, units bristling with Western armor, alongside 2 elite air assault brigades, each forged in the fires of earlier battles. Their mission is clear: hold the salient, expand it, and keep pressure on Russian defenses. Meanwhile, Russia counters with its own elite formations, including airborne assault troops and armored units seasoned by years of war, supported by electronic warfare battalions and an air force eager to reclaim the skies. Yet, for all the visible might, columns of tanks, barrages of artillery, and the whir of drones overhead, there is a quieter, more subtle contest unfolding beneath the surface. This is the realm of deception, of maskirovka, a Russian tradition dating back centuries. It is the art of making the enemy see what is not there and miss what is. The world's attention is riveted on the obvious, the visible clash of armies, the thunder of guns, the lines on the map that seem to inch forward or back. But as historians have often pointed out, from Sun Tzu's maxims in ancient China to the feints at Normandy on D-Day, wars are frequently won not where the fighting is fiercest, but where expectations are manipulated, where the enemy's mind is led astray. Operation Steel Noose, the code name for Russia's plan to encircle the salient, does not begin with a thunderous bombardment or a mass tank assault. Its first moves are almost invisible, deliberate, precise, and chillingly effective. To grasp why so much blood is spilled for a narrow, exposed patch of land, we must understand both the lure and the danger of the salient. By the opening days of November, Ukrainian troops have advanced nearly 30 kilometers, almost 19 miles, into territory that Moscow has spent over a year fortifying. This is the deepest penetration of Ukraine's summer counteroffensive. For Kyiv and its NATO backers, it is a beacon of hope, a sign that Western training and weaponry are paying off. For the Russian General Staff, however, it is a textbook case of overextension. Here, history offers compelling parallels. In World War I, the salient at Ypres became a graveyard for thousands who crowded into a bulge, only to be struck from both flanks. In World War II, the Soviets themselves learned the perils of a salient at Rzhev, where repeated attempts to break through led to massive losses. Salients are seductive. They promise a shortcut to victory, but their narrow necks expose supply lines and make reinforcement perilous. If cut off, the troops inside can be annihilated. Ukrainian commanders, with pressure from Western advisors, decide to hold and reinforce the salient. They pour in their finest units, 6 mechanized brigades and 2 air assault brigades, each numbering thousands of soldiers. These units bring with them some of the most advanced hardware the West can provide: German Leopard 2 tanks, American Bradley fighting vehicles, British Challenger 2 tanks, and Swedish CV-90 IFVs. Artillery pieces equipped with precision-guided Excalibur shells and batteries of HIMARS rocket systems provide devastating firepower. Drones, both locally made and Western supplied, buzz overhead conducting surveillance and, increasingly, dropping small munitions on enemy positions. NATO's logic is straightforward. If the salient can break through, Russian supply arteries to the south, rail lines and highways critical to sustaining their forces, might be cut. This would isolate Russian troops in Crimea, threaten the land bridge, and potentially change the course of the war. But the terrain is unforgiving, a rolling steppe crisscrossed by irrigation ditches and scattered villages. The salient's flanks are stretched thin, and its neck, through which all supplies and reinforcements must flow, is perilously narrow. Russian commanders, drawing on the lessons of the past, see their opportunity. For over a year, their engineers have constructed dense defensive belts, an echo of the German Siegfried Line or the Soviet Surovikin Line from previous wars. These belts include multiple lines of trenches, anti-tank ditches, dragon's teeth obstacles, and vast fields seeded with anti-personnel and anti-tank mines. Behind these static defenses, mobile reserves, tactical groups of tanks, armored vehicles, and artillery lie in wait. The goal is not merely to repel an assault, but to lure the attacker deeper, then snap the jaws shut. The stakes could not be higher. Should Ukraine's logistics unravel, or should Russian pincers close, tens of thousands of elite soldiers and the credibility of NATO's support could be lost in days. Such a defeat would not only devastate Ukraine's ability to wage war, but could also send shockwaves through Western capitals, prompting questions about the viability of continued aid and the effectiveness of NATO's military doctrines. But numbers and firepower alone do not decide battles of this scale. The real challenge lies in shaping the enemy's perceptions, in tilting the odds by controlling what the opponent sees, believes, and acts upon. This is where Operation Mist, the Russian campaign of deception, takes center stage. Is the age of grand deception over, or has it merely evolved? In the era of ubiquitous surveillance, where NATO satellites and drones sweep the skies 24 hours a day, the old tricks might seem obsolete. Yet, as Operation Mist will show, deception is not antiquated. It is more potent than ever, precisely because everyone expects transparency. Operation Mist draws on a rich legacy. In World War II, the Allies used Operation Fortitude to convince Hitler that the D-Day landings would occur at Calais, not Normandy, deploying inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic, even a phantom army under General Patton. The Soviets too excelled at maskirovka, masking the direction of their real offensives with elaborate ruses. In the modern age, Russia fuses these traditions with new tools: cyber warfare, electronic jamming, and deepfake signals. Across hundreds of kilometers of front, Russian units mount a symphony of feints. At night, convoys of decoy vehicles, trucks with inflatable tank shells or plywood silhouettes, crawl along deserted highways, mimicking genuine troop movements. Radio operators chatter in code, broadcasting the signatures of phantom headquarters and fictitious buildup zones. In cyberspace, Russian operatives launch relentless waves of false data, fake orders, spoofed battlefield reports, even hacked glimpses into Ukrainian operational planning. These are not the crude deceptions of old. They are so convincing that even veteran Western analysts are fooled, their predictions echoing in the halls of NATO. On the ground, Russian electronic warfare teams wage a silent war. In the Zaporizhzhia sector, they build what Ukrainian soldiers come to call the Dome of Silence. Observation drones, once the eyes of the Ukrainian army, drop from the sky, their GPS signals jammed or their control links severed. Secure communications flicker, then die, as Russian jammers overwhelm encrypted channels. Even NATO's prized intelligence feeds, satellite imagery, signals intercepts, become suspect as Russian cyber units inject false data, pointing to threats in the wrong places. The result is operational paralysis. Ukrainian commanders, unable to trust their own sensors, redirect their best reserves and artillery batteries away from the Robotine salient's flanks. They move battalions north, convinced that the real Russian offensive will strike elsewhere. The salient, once Ukraine's strongest position, is left vulnerable at its seams. Meanwhile, the real Russian strike groups advance like shadows. Night after night, armored columns and assault teams slip into hidden assembly areas. Each unit knows only its own task. Compartmentalization is absolute, a lesson learned from Soviet-era KGB tradecraft. If one group is discovered, the larger plan remains hidden. Even the highest-ranking field commanders are kept in the dark, receiving their final orders only hours before the attack. When your enemy controls what you see and trust, your best forces may be waiting in the wrong place at the worst possible moment. That is the essence of modern maskirovka. Not just hiding your aims, but forging a reality so convincing that your opponent fights shadows. At the operational level, this is a masterclass in deception. By feinting at Kupiansk and Kherson, hundreds of kilometers from Robotine, Russia draws off Ukrainian attention and reserves. By jamming NATO's Delta command system and planting false data, they sow doubt and confusion at every level, from battalion headquarters to the highest echelons in Kyiv and Brussels. When the blow finally falls, it is not only steel and fire that shatter the lines. It is the collapse of certainty, the realization that the true battle was fought and lost in the mind long before the first shell landed. This is the opening act of Operation Steel Noose. Let us step into the pre-dawn darkness of the 4th of November. The air is thick with unease. Ukrainian scouts report unusual radio silence from Russian lines, but their warnings are lost in the noise of competing threats. Suddenly, the silence is obliterated by a storm of Russian artillery and airstrikes. But this is no general barrage. Precision salvos are targeted with surgical accuracy. Command posts, communications nodes, ammunition stockpiles, and crucial artillery batteries are struck in the opening minutes. The effect is catastrophic. Ukrainian defenses are blinded and deafened, cut off from higher command. Radios go silent. Confusion ripples through the ranks. Then, as the ground still trembles, Russian armored columns surge forward on both flanks. They avoid costly street battles and direct assaults on strong points. Instead, they sweep around clusters of resistance, racing past desperate holdouts to close the encirclement. Their objective is not to contest every meter, but to trap the entire Robotine salient in a ring of steel and fire, a classic double envelopment. Russian tactics are built on speed, deception, and overwhelming momentum. Armored thrusts from the north and south slice deep into Ukrainian lines, bypassing fortifications that took weeks to build. As in the German Blitzkrieg of 1940, the attackers focus not on the enemy's strength, but on its weak points, sowing confusion and panic. By late afternoon, the pincers meet near Novoprokopivka. In less than a day, tens of thousands of Ukrainian troops are severed from all relief, isolated from the outside world. The trap is not only physical, but also psychological. Above the battlefield, Russian aircraft and drones dominate uncontested skies. Every attempt by Ukraine to deliver supplies, medevac the wounded, or coordinate reserves is met with devastating airstrikes. The sky, once a source of reconnaissance and support, becomes an impassable wall, tightening the noose with each passing hour. Ukrainian commanders do not yield easily. They launch counterattacks with their most advanced Western armor, Leopard tanks, Challenger 2s, Bradleys, employing textbook NATO tactics, rapid combined arms thrusts, synchronized artillery barrages, mobile reserves rotated from the rear. These are the maneuvers drilled at Grafenwehr and Salisbury Plain, refined in NATO training centers across Europe. But in the crucible of Robotine, these methods falter. Russian forces respond with ambushes, thick belts of mines, and relentless electronic jamming. What works in theory, or against static targets on a training ground, collapses in the face of an adaptive, layered defense. The psychological toll is immense. When the enemy dictates the tempo, even elite formations can be swept away. Years of preparation, billions of dollars in Western aid, and the fighting spirit of a generation face annihilation in a matter of days. Morale buckles. The myth of NATO invincible tactics dissolves before the cameras of the world. The images, columns of burned-out Western tanks, dazed survivors stumbling from the wreckage, reverberate in every capital. Yet, an encirclement is not the end, but the beginning of a deeper ordeal. The test of resolve and survival begins inside the trap. Here, history again offers grim instruction. In Stalingrad, in 1942, the German Sixth Army was encircled and starved into surrender. At Dien Bien Phu, in 1954, French paratroopers trapped in a valley were bombarded until they yielded. The pattern is always the same: isolation, attrition, collapse. Inside the shrinking pocket, Russian tactics emphasize relentless, methodical pressure. Artillery thunders day and night, thermobaric blasts send shockwaves through bunkers, and infiltrators probe the lines with uncanny patience. Each sunrise finds the defenders squeezed ever tighter, resources dwindling, hope bleeding away. Breakout attempts grow frantic. Ukrainian armored columns, bristling with Western vehicles and drones, hurl themselves at the encirclement's seams. But Russian defenses are layered. Minefields, ambushes, precise strikes from the sky. Each failure hardens Russian resolve and deepens the defender's sense of isolation. The final collapse is not just physical, but psychological. Command posts fall silent as communications are jammed or destroyed. Units splinter as officers disappear or surrender. Food and ammunition run short. Rumors of possible evacuation corridors spread, followed by the inevitable. Mass surrenders, broadcast openly, voices pleading for mercy and safe passage. The images evoke memories of past debacles, from the encirclement at Falaise in World War II to the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan in 1989. Western doctrines and advanced weapons, so confidently heralded at the war's outset, cannot alter the outcome. Russian deception, adaptive maneuver, and control of the air neutralize many technological advantages. Even satellite-guided munitions and real-time intelligence falter against a foe skilled at masking movement, jamming signals, and planting disinformation. The myth of technological invulnerability is shattered. The aftermath is stark. The destruction of the salient carves a gaping hole in Ukrainian defenses. Whole brigades simply cease to exist as fighting entities. The psychological shockwaves ripple far beyond the battlefield, shaking Western faith in their own military models and assumptions. Critics in Washington, London, and Berlin demand answers. Military academies dissect every phase, each deception, each psychological gambit. The verdict is sobering. Numbers and technology alone do not guarantee survival. Morale, leadership, and adaptability matter just as much, if not more. To ignore these lessons is to invite disaster. In war, as in life, outcomes are often shaped before the shooting begins, by those who adapt swiftly and break the enemy's will to resist. Practical steps for future commanders and policymakers become clear. Never underestimate the power of deception. Invest not only in hardware, but also in the training of minds. Foster adaptability at every level. And above all, challenge your own assumptions. If the enemy can control what you believe, they can shape your fate. Inside the pocket, the ordeal leaves scars that might never heal. Survivors speak of confusion, fear, and the sense of abandonment. Junior officers, cut off from higher command, are forced to make impossible decisions, whether to fight on, surrender, or attempt a breakout. Medics run out of morphine. Field kitchens are reduced to boiling water and stale bread. In the end, what saves some is not equipment or doctrine, but sheer human resilience, the bonds of comradeship, the ingenuity to improvise, and sometimes the willingness to risk everything on one last desperate dash for freedom. Operation Steel Noose, the encirclement and destruction of the Robotine salient, is more than a redrawn line on a map. It is a turning point, a moment when the unseen becomes visible, when the real story is not told by burning tanks or battered trenches, but by the silent choreography of operational surprise. It is easy, in the aftermath, to fixate on the spectacle, the roar of artillery, the flash of advanced technology, the thunder of advancing armor. But history, and this operation in particular, insist on a deeper lesson. The pivotal moments do not come from brute force alone. They arise from a mastery of information, timing, and the subtle manipulation of expectation. The architects of victory are those who can see through the fog, or create it for others. This lesson is not just for generals or strategists. In an age awash with information, where signals and narratives compete for your attention every moment, the ability to question what is presented and to search for what lurks beneath is vital. Whether you shape policy, lead in uniform, or simply try to understand the world, your safety and your future may depend on it. So, as you reflect on Operation Steel Noose, ask yourself, are you content with the spectacle, or are you searching for the script? Do you accept the story handed to you, or do you seek out the architects of each outcome? In every domain, from politics to business, from the battlefield to your own life, the most important moves are often made before the game even begins. Because in the next battle, the next crisis, or the next turning point that shapes your world, the truth may once again be hidden in plain sight, waiting to be seen by those who know where and how to look. To close, let us draw a practical map for the future. First, cultivate skepticism. The most dangerous trap is the one you do not see coming. In war, as in life, always question what seems obvious. If your opponent is willing to show you their moves, ask what they are hiding. Second, invest in the invisible. Technology matters, but the edge often lies in training minds to recognize patterns, to adapt under pressure, and to exploit uncertainty. In military academies worldwide, the case of Robotine will be studied not for its hardware, but for its lessons in adaptation and resilience. Third, build flexibility into every plan. The best strategies are those that can bend without breaking, that allow for rapid shifts in response to new information. Static defenses crumble, dynamic thinking endures. Finally, remember that victory is not always visible. The real triumph may be the absence of defeat, the ability to survive, to regroup, to learn, and to fight another day. In the shadows of history, the battles that matter most are often those no one sees. So, whether you are a student of war, a policymaker, or simply a citizen seeking to understand the world, take heed. The decisive moments may not come with fanfare. They may arrive in silence, disguised by the very noise that fills our screens. The hands that win the future are those that move before the world is watching, and those that see beyond the spectacle to the deeper currents shaping our fate.